Jai Prabhuji. So we reached to our last class in the course of Buddhism. Today is our last class. And we will visit a few more important stations in the history of Buddhism in our timeline. A short overview before we get to the stations. In the course, what we did so far, we started from the life of the Buddha and his core teachings. So the first class was about the Buddha and his life. The second class was about the Four Noble Truths, which is essential teachings of the Buddha. The third class was about the Eightfold Middle Way Path, which is also essential teachings of the Buddha. Both were taught, both the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Middle Way Path were taught by the Buddha himself, and we can find reference to it in the Pali Canon, which is considered the most original teachings, not just according to monks, but also according to scholars. Okay? In the fourth class, after zooming in the core principles of Buddhism, we zoomed out in the fourth class and tried to get a picture of Buddhism in the world, how it spread, how it developed in the years, and the main schools of Buddhism. So in the fourth class, we spoke about the two main schools of Buddhism. One that is the Theravada school, that basically follow the original teachings of the Buddha, the Pali Canon, that is the original words of the Buddha, both according to scholars and also according to monks, that was in fact recorded by direct disciples of the Buddha that heard these teachings from the Buddha directly. So the Theravadins follow this scripture. This is their essential scripture, and the teachings that are in this scripture, basically. They are more focused on what was spoken directly by the Buddha. They see the Buddha as a human being. They see their goal in life as personal liberation, individual liberation. And they see themselves as spiritual practitioners different than other human beings or lay practitioners. That they see the distinction. We mention it because this is versus Mahayana, that is the second big school of Buddhism. Mahayana is not just, it's a name for many, many schools in Buddhism. It's a whole approach. So Mahayana, different than the Theravada, are followers that took more a broad direction according to how they see it. So according to the Mahayana, their view is broader, and the view of the Theravada is more narrow. This is why they call them Hinayana, which is not a name that the Theravadins like, because it basically says that they are more narrow-minded and they focus on the words of the Buddha and not on the spirit of what he said and of the essence of Buddhism. So this is the point of view of the Mahayana school. The Mahayana school accepts, of course, the Pali Canon, but adapts many more scriptures, more deities, more also local spiritual paths where it spread in different areas in East Asia. And the core teachings of the Mahayana is the Prajna Paramita that we mentioned in the previous class when we spoke about Nagarjuna, that is considered the founder of the Mahayana. And the Prajna Paramita Sutras, we said, are a collection of 40 sutras that focus on emptiness, on shunyata. This is the essence of the Mahayana school. And according to the Mahayana monks, the Prajna Paramita Sutras were also spoken directly by the Buddha, and they were just preserved for many years until the world would be ready to receive them. This is when they were revealed centuries later, which is why scholars don't accept this view so much, because it's hard to prove from a scholar point of view that really the Buddha spoke the Prajna Paramita Sutras. But of course, we don't know the reality. We just present the views. According to the Mahayana approach, the Prajna Paramita Sutras were taught by the Buddha just to very elevated disciples, because they were so high, because they are really the essence. They are really the truth that the Buddha spoke. And we do see, and we saw also in the previous class, particularly, I believe, maybe in the one before that also, the fifth class, that we find, of course, the essence of shunyata and emptiness in the Pali Canon. in the dependent origination that we found in the Pali Canon that explains how everything is interrelated, nothing is independent, nothing has independent existence. So definitely the Buddha spoke about the emptiness, but they just kind of developed it more or delved more into this essence of emptiness and shunyata, which will be later developed in the stations that we will speak about in this class, which speak about the Chan and the Zen, that also, of course, based on the principle of emptiness, if we can call it in this way, and that are, of course, part of the Mahayana school. So again, Mahayana is a big name. It also includes the Vajrayana that we mentioned in the first class, that is sometimes considered a third school and sometimes part of the Mahayana. The Vajrayana is the Tibetan Buddhism because it's prominent in Tibet, and it's sometimes called Tantric Buddhism. It has a lot of tantric elements, also influenced by the Tantra of Hinduism, and it's focused on realization in attaining realization in one lifetime, in a serious practice to attain realization as soon as possible in one lifetime. This is the approach of Vajrayana. And we will meet Vajrayana today again in our timeline as we will go through the timeline. But we spoke a little more about it in the first class when we present the view of Buddhism. So let's go back to the overview we left in the first class, which gave us a picture. And on purpose, I mentioned again the schools because it's relevant also to the topics we will talk about in this class and to the teachers, so we can again locate it under where in this umbrella of Buddhism it is. So the beginning of the course was more, we can say, Theravada, the councils and how everything developed, the words of the Buddha, etc. And as we go further with the timeline, we meet more the Mahayana. Although, of course, until today we have both Theravada and Mahayana. So Theravada continued also parallel to Mahayana in other countries, which we covered in the first class, where geographically what practices are practiced, what paths are practiced. So after the fourth class, we delve deeper in the fifth class into more teachings of the Buddha about the reality, about truth, and of course, speaking about truth, it's speaking about the illusion. We mentioned again the Four Noble Truths. We mentioned the 12-link dependent origination, which is this process that shows how everything in this world is interrelated to something else. So again, nothing is individually, independently existent, ultimately existent. Everything is subject, is dependent, is conditioned to something else. And this basically shows us how everything is empty of existence, which leads again to the shunyata and to the essence of Zen that we will meet today. And we also spoke about the remarks of existence, again stressing the same understanding. Another topic we can say that the Buddha spoke about, that described the same understanding that everything, if you remember, is suffering, as we met in the Four Noble Truths, is impermanent, and it has no self. It's no self, anatta. It's empty of self. It has no independent existence, again. Another topic that showed us. And then we spoke about the fact that although the Buddha spoke about this ultimate reality, that nothing exists, everything is impermanent, he also spoke on the level, and mostly this is basically the path and why we study and why he taught and why he spoke teaching that were later put into writing, because in this world that is the conditional level, it's the relational state. So there is ultimate reality, we said, and there is also relational reality or conditioned reality, which is also some extent of reality. We do experience it, and this is why in this world we want to get liberated from the suffering that identifies it. And this is the reason for all the teaching. And we saw this link between the view on reality and the practical advice that the Buddha gives us. And we also met the same principle with Nagarjuna. Of course, we will meet it again today with Zen. So basically, masters describe the reality as that we kind of have nothing to do about it, and at the same time guide us to do things, which is paradoxical, but also all the spiritual paths finally, in a way it's paradoxical because it leads us beyond the mind. Masters tell us you don't need to do anything, but at the same time try to be considerate and loving and cleanse your impurities. So we see this principle repeating. This is the principle we spoke about in the 5th class. And then in the last class we spoke about Nagarjuna. That was kind of the beginning of the Mahayana. And Nagarjuna further showed us, demonstrated intellectually the principle of emptiness, intellectually proved, we can say, or clarified how everything is empty of its own existence by logically negating all extremes. So the path of Nagarjuna, the Madhyamaka school, is the middle way path. So showing that the middle way means that basically everything in this world is not middle, it's extreme. Every word that we say, every view that we teach, every understanding that we have, it's all extreme views of reality. The reality is not this and not this. As he quoted the Buddha, if you remember, the Buddha said, everything exists, this is one extreme. Everything that doesn't exist, this is another extreme. And the Tathagata teaches the way via the middle. Okay? So, the Tathagata teaches the Dharma via the middle. So, we relate to this word because now we have to speak and to communicate with extreme means. This is the word. We are bound to this word. However, we should remember that the truth cannot be found in this level of perception, of logic, and of extreme view. It's beyond the doctrines. And this is why Nagarjuna also said, I do not say the truth. No one can say the truth. I only negate. My view is also not right. Nagarjuna says, my view is empty. Emptiness is also empty. It's not a concept that is ultimate, because you cannot say any view that will be ultimate. And by this, he reminded, as we said, the practitioners not to cling to a doctrine and to a path and to understanding and to achievements. To remember that finally the Buddha spoke about some essence, that the only value of it is realization of it, not understanding and speaking and writing and teaching or being better than others, which is essential. And we will meet it also today with other masters. So with this short presentation, we are ready to move forward in our timeline. Our next station is the Yogachara school that we can find in our timeline in the 4th century. Yogachara school is a school that was founded, considered by Vasubandhu. Although Yogachara existed before Vasubandhu, it emerged in the 2nd century, but it was mostly developed in the 4th century when Vasubandhu lived and taught, 4th century Common Era. Another founder of the Yogachara school is Asanga, that was Vasubandhu's half-brother, older than him. And he takes a little bit different approach at some point, but both are considered founder of Yogachara. But the main one that we are going to speak is Vasubandhu. So Vasubandhu became a monk at a young age, followed his half-brother again. He interestingly taught and wrote about other philosophies before adopting the Yogachara. So he kind of changed his mind, or we presented the reality a little bit different. And the essence of the Yogachara school, the meaning of the words Yogachara are yoga plus achara, as we can guess. Yoga is the yoga of Hinduism. It speaks about the ultimate reality and also about the practice. And achara is a conduct in Sanskrit. So Yogachara is the practice of yoga or the conduct of yoga. This is the main understanding of the name. The teaching of Yogachara tell us that basically this world is all illusion. Okay, so Nagarjuna will say about it in an extreme view. Nothing exists but consciousness. So another name to this school is consciousness only. everything that we perceive in this world, it's basically our mind. Everything that we see is our mind. Everything that we eat, touch, smell, whatever experience we have is just our mind. And outside the mind, it's all consciousness. It's very similar to the Advaita Vedanta of Hinduism. In Yogachara, there is a term that is alaya vijnana. Alaya vijnana, that means storehouse consciousness. So this storehouse consciousness is what creates the illusion. Okay, similar to the mind in Advaita. It's where we have all our previous actions that are waiting to create future reactions, waiting as seeds, all the vasanas. And this is what forms the illusion of division. So the illusion is that we see the world as separated. As we separate ourselves from others, we separate items, everything is divided in this view of the mind, but this is an illusion. The reality is consciousness only. But in this very basic level of consciousness of the alaya vijnana, which is the most basic, the most illusionary, we experience this division, we experience suffering, we experience bondage. The way to liberate from this bondage is yoga and meditation. So in the samsara, in this trap of actions and reactions, we cannot go out. We can only fortify the reactions. But only by meditation we can weaken these bonds, these chains, and finally, hopefully, be liberated, which is, of course, the goal of Yogachara and where it directs us to be liberated from this illusion by yoga practice. Okay, our next station is the Pure Land. So the Pure Land appears in our timeline in the 5th century. It's between the 5th century to the 6th century. And if we spoke now about the Advaita Vedanta of Hinduism, now we get to the Bhakti Yoga of Hinduism. We can see similar principle in the Pure Land of Buddhism. So according to the Pure Land, this world is corrupted. It's a world of suffering and there's no way to change it. So in this world, we are always going to be trapped in this suffering, in this corruption, in this illusion. And we, by our efforts, don't have the ability to liberate ourselves. So while Pure Land doesn't reject the path of wisdom, it accepts it as valid. But it sees it as, because it's so long, impractical. And we see also this contrast in Hinduism between Bhakti and Advaita. Bhakti yogis will say, Advaita is good, but it's going to take you so long and it's going to be so hard, so practically it's impossible. What we need to do, because in this situation that we are so bound and we cannot do it with our own efforts, is to ask for grace, is to develop devotion and love, and by grace only we can be liberated. So Pure Land Buddhism worships Amitabha Buddha or Amida Buddha. The aspiration of the devotees of the Pure Land is to be reborn in a different world, in a Pure Land, when there is no suffering. Okay, so it's a path of devotion, of love, of humility, of realizing our insignificance, our inability to liberate ourselves. But Amitabha Buddha, by his endless grace, he's going to help us. Next in our timeline, we meet Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma is a very, very important figure in Buddhism, particularly in Mahayana Buddhism. And when he appears, is a revolutionary point in the timeline of Buddhism. He was very revolutionary, and he made a big revolution. He basically started the Chan Buddhism in China, what will become later the Zen Buddhism in Japan. When Bodhidharma came to China, he met with the emperor. And when the emperor saw Bodhidharma, the emperor was a Buddhist practitioner himself, and he was very satisfied with his deeds, with his understanding in Buddhism. He donated a lot to monks and to nuns, and he built temples, and he published scriptures, and he was very aware of the law of karma and how significant all this is. And so he asked Bodhidharma, what is my merit? And Bodhidharma replied to him, no merit. The emperor didn't like it and probably became upset. And then he continued with another question, and he asked him, what is the essence of Buddhism? Maybe it was, so what is the essence of Buddhism if there's no law of cause and effect that the Buddha taught us? And Bodhidharma replied to this question, what is the essence of Buddhism? No essence whatsoever, only emptiness. The emperor didn't become happier, and he concluded with a third question, and the Bodhidharma didn't disappoint us. The third question was that he asked him, so who is standing before me if everything is emptiness? And Bodhidharma replied without shame, I do not know. And this short story very much illustrates to us what is Zen Buddhism and what Bodhidharma brought to China. So Bodhidharma lived in the 5th century or 6th century. We meet him in our timeline in the 6th century, Common Era. He was born in India. He was the 3rd son of a king who was very attracted to Buddhism from a young age, and he became a monk. And he followed his guru, and when his guru, before he passed away, he instructed him to go to China. Now, going from India to China in the 6th century, we can only imagine what a journey it was. It was a very long and difficult and dangerous journey. And Bodhidharma took this journey and made it from India to China. And he basically brought dhyana of Hinduism. The Sanskrit word dhyana was Chan of Chinese, and later will be Zen in Japan. So the origin is dhyan, or meditation, that is often translated as meditation. And the meeting that we saw between Bodhidharma and the emperor was very similar to all the meeting that he had with China. So in this time, there was Buddhism in China. Buddhism was practiced in China, but the focus was on meditation, but a lot the scriptures and the karma and exactly what we met with the emperor. Emperor was typical of the practice of Buddhism at the time of Bodhidharma, and this is why he was not wholeheartedly accepted at the time. He had a lot of rejection. He was a very strong, probably, character, rebellious, and wasn't afraid to say his teachings in a very sharp way, and in a way that is shocking to the mind. Because even though we hear the first time meditation is beyond words, okay, but then when we understand what is the path and what is the goal and what we need to do and what we need to refrain of, and something say, all this is nothing, it's shocking. And this is what happened with a few masters in Buddhism, and probably every true master will do this effect to the mind. And Bodhidharma definitely did it. So he was very much rejected. He in fact referred to in the Chinese scriptures as the blue-eyed barbarian. And he had disciples, and he taught meditation, he taught Chan. He very much directed practitioners to focus on realization, to forget a teaching, to focus on meditation in one lifetime, and that meditation happens, the truth, Buddhism, is outside of the scriptures. It's outside of the Four Noble Truths, ultimately. It's outside of the, of course, law of karma and all our understanding. And this is what we should focus on through realization. There is a 4-line verse that summarizes the essence of Chan and of Zen, and is usually attributed to Bodhidharma, that says as follows: a special transformation outside the teachings, not dependent on words and phrases, directly pointing to the human heart, seeing into its nature and awakening. So this tells us about the essence of what Bodhidharma taught. Bodhidharma is considered also by many to have founded the Shaolin Temple, and all the martial arts are said to be descended from him. He is, of course, the first patriarch of Chan. He was the first teacher, and he's considered the 28th patriarch of Buddhism, descending in the line from the Buddha himself via Mahakashyapa, that was the successor of the Buddha, or his direct disciple. He practiced many years. We said that he was also rejected by many in China at the time, and he practiced many long years of silent meditation in what is called wall gazing, that is said in front of the wall, that we will meet also after a lot in Zen. This is something that Bodhidharma brought. And there is a story that tells us that Bodhidharma once was sitting and meditating, and he fell asleep for a second, which upset him so much that he cut his eyelids. And from the eyelids that fell on the ground sprouted tea plants. And we will see tea plants are considered to be aid for monks when they meditate for many hours and need to wake up a little bit, so they use tea. So this is the significance of the tea in Chan and in Zen, that is attributed also to the Bodhidharma as bringing it together with the Zen meditation, with the Zazen, or Shikantaza in Chinese. Last story about Bodhidharma is a story about his disappearance, which also this story makes us this effect of Zen that takes us beyond the mind. So the story says that the Bodhidharma, after being dead for many years, a politician, an ambassador, a diplomat, met him walking on the mountains towards India. And he saw him walking with one shoe on his back. And he asked him, "Where are you going?" And Bodhidharma replied, "I'm going home," referring to India. And then he asked him, "Why do you have this shoe on your back? One shoe?" And Bodhidharma replied, "You will find the answer when you get to the Shaolin Temple." And Bodhidharma also told him that not to tell the emperor that he met him, because he's going to get into troubles. He's going to meet with disaster. But to this, the diplomat didn't listen so much, and so he did get into troubles. And when he got back, he told the emperor that he met Bodhidharma. And the emperor was very upset with him because Bodhidharma was already dead for a long, long time, so he arrested him right away for lying. And then people were sent to check in the monastery what happened with the grave of Bodhidharma. So they opened the grave, and in the grave they found one shoe. So this is a story about Bodhidharma that leaves us with the taste of Zen to continue forward. And in fact, in the timeline before moving to Zen, we find the Tibetan Buddhism in the 7th century. Tantric Buddhism that we mentioned earlier, the Vajrayana school, developed mostly in the 7th century, and we already spoke about it a little bit in the beginning and also more in the 4th class, so we won't delve much more into it. We just want to remember that it's totally interrelated with Mahayana. So there are many Tantric Buddhism elements practiced in different areas of Mahayana practitioners, and also, as we said, Vajrayana can be considered part of Mahayana. So it's not like totally distinct schools, but it is more particular in Tibet. Moving to Zen. Zen Buddhism started generally in the 9th century, we can say beginning of 9th century. So it was brought from China to Japan, and it was mostly developed or more developed in the 12th and 13th centuries, when we will meet two very important teachers that we are going to speak a little bit today. The practice of Zen, as we saw when we spoke about Bodhidharma, so Bodhidharma kind of speaking about Bodhidharma, we already spoke about the essence of Zen that will be again further developed in Japan, but based on China. So we will see soon how the masters went back to China to find the original Zen in China. because it's broader from Bodhidharma. The principle of Zen, again, as we mentioned, is that truth is outside the scriptures, outside logic, outside doctrine and rigid path, in daily life, in being present, in simple work, hard work. It's an important aspect in Zen, just the hard work in mindfulness. So it's to pay attention to the simple moments, to everything basically. It's not that spiritual life is separated than our life, but Zen is basically the truth that happens all the time. According to Zen, enlightenment is not something that needs to happen or will happen, but it's our natural state. So we are all in nature Buddhas. It's important to know it, and we just need to pay attention. This is the essence of Zen. The main practice is meditation. Sit quietly and meditate, which is called Zazen, which was called in China Shikantaza, and also we saw the focus of Bodhidharma in this aspect of practice, the meditation. Zen speaks about the truth being outside the scriptures, but Zen also had teaching and understanding and practices. And it was in fact very influenced by both the Madhyamaka school of Mahayana and also the Yogachara school of Mahayana, the two important schools in Mahayana. To the Madhyamaka of Nagarjuna, we can see the principle of the truth being in the middle, in nothing concrete, in what is experienced in between everything, in paying attention, which is also what Nagarjuna pointed us to. And also we see the aspect of Yogachara, that the bondage of this world is in mental conceptions, in our perception, but it's not in the reality. And we should meditate, as in Yogachara, to realize the reality as it is, and this is what will bring us to liberation. To be in line with our nature that is perfect as it is, that is a Buddha nature, which is the essence of Zen. Another aspect that is important in Zen is the aspect of the spiritual master, someone who is enlightened and can lead us to the way. Because the truth written in a book cannot lead us to be in touch with it really, because it's so abstract and so much not something that can be verbalized. So only someone who is in this truth can take us there. And there are two important schools of Zen that we will speak a little bit now. There are more schools, but these are the main ones that, as I said earlier, were developed in the 12th to the 13th centuries. The first one being Rinzai, that was founded by Mayoen Isai. Isai lived and taught between the 12th to the 13th centuries, Common Era. He was a Buddhist monk from a young age and first practiced Tendai Zen that was prominent in China prior to these two schools. He became Buddhist at a young age, and he was actually not satisfied with the practice of Buddhism and teaching of Buddhism that he found in Japan, and he went to China to find more the original Buddhism. So Issei went twice to China, and in China he practiced mainly koans. Koans is another important aspect of Zen that he found in China, that is paradoxical enigmas that are posed by a master in order to take us beyond the mind. So, and it was important practice, not just another angle, but in fact the path of Rinzai, the path of Issai, that is called Rinzai, its main focus is koans. So the koans, again, they are given by the masters to the disciples, and disciples can either reply right away, or they can meditate on it for days or for months even, or even later, trying to answer these difficult questions that are not exactly questions, and it's not clear if the focus is on the answer or on the question, or neither nor, just beyond. But this puzzling is the process, this wandering and breaking the mind, sort of. It's the process in order to lead the practitioner beyond the mind, which is, of course, what the master wanted the disciples where he wants the disciples to go. And this path, the Rinzai, is a path of abrupt awakening also. It's like focus on realization as soon as possible in one lifetime, but different shocks. Masters could shout on disciples or can do different things that are provoking awakening. So Isai met the Rinzai school in China, that was called in China Linji, and he brought it to Japan. After his second trip, he brought it to Japan, where he established the first Zen temple in Japan, and he taught disciples. And he also brought the tea drinking to Japan. That was in fact already in Japan before that, but became much more significant because it came together with the meditation of the Zen, and it was very much assisting the meditation, because monks would just sit hours and hours to meditate, and the tea would help them to not fall asleep. It was part of the practice. Rinzai is a southern school, in opposing to the second school that we're going to speak now, that is a northern school. And as we said again, it's a strong path to direct self-realization right away, a direct path to self-realization, to awakening. It also focuses on labor work with mindfulness, with being aware. And of course, Zazen is definitely also a part of it. But koans are a very central part. It's the heart of the Rinzai school. Now we move to Soto. So Soto Zen developed in the 13th century, just a little bit after the Rinzai school. So we said Rinzai was between the 12th to the 13th century. Soto was founded by Dogen, very important teacher, master in Buddhism, who was born in 1200, so a little after. He taught in the 13th century. Dogen was a curious child that from a young age was very curious about the questions of life. And in fact, both his parents died when he was very little. So his father passed away when he was 2, and his mother passed away when he was 7. And these events made him to wonder very much about the suffering and the impermanence. So it is said that in his mother's funeral, he kind of meditated on the smoke of the incense and saw how everything is vanishing so fast, like the smoke. And this led him to practice Buddhism, to become a monk. And the question that bothered him, in fact, mostly in his young age of practice, is if everyone has a Buddha nature and we are already enlightened, so why all the masters teach something, and why there is enlightenment and before and after? It seemed to him as a contradiction. And he couldn't solve it. It was something that really bothered him, and he was dealing with it. And he wasn't satisfied also with the Tendai school that he practiced at the beginning. And so he tried also to learn from the Rinzai school. He in fact met also Isai once, the founder of the Rinzai. And he learned later with a disciple of Isai, but he didn't connect fully to this path. He didn't appreciate too much the reliance on koans, and he also didn't find still the answer to the question he was looking for. So he still didn't think that this is a satisfying answer to this question. Again, if enlightenment is our nature, if we are Buddha, was and will be always, so what is this teaching and what is this enlightenment that masters guide us to? So he further seeked, and like Isai, also Dogen went to China to find the more original teachings and to find the answer to his question. And in China, indeed, he met his teacher. His name is Rujin, and in Japan he's called Nyojo. And this master, in fact, taught Dogen that while enlightenment is our nature, nothing needs to happen, but we just need to pay attention. And this is why meditation is the most essential teaching. And meditation is also the essence of the Soto. So the school in China is Kaodon, and it will be Soto in Japan. Okay, so similar to Isai, also Dogen brought a school from China to Japan, and this was the establishment of the Soto. He also established a temple and a disciples and taught them, and the center of his teaching is that nothing should happen, nothing needs to happen, nothing needs to change. We just need to sit and pay attention, and just sitting is already enlightenment. We are there. Nothing should happen. Just sitting and meditating, we are already there in the Buddha nature, because it's our nature. We cannot not be there, right? As Prabhuji said. You're aware that you're not aware, this is awareness. So this was the essence of Dogen's teachings. No matter how bad a state of mind you may get into, if you keep strong and hold out, eventually the floating cloud must vanish and the withering wind must cease. When you paint spring, do not paint willows, plums, peaches, or apricots, but just paint spring. To paint willows, plums, peaches, or apricots is to paint willows, plums, peaches, or apricots. It is not yet painting spring. If you want to travel the way of Buddhas and Zen masters, then expect nothing, seek nothing, and grasp nothing. So a few words about the Dalai Lama before we get to the conclusion of this class and of this course. The Dalai Lama, we can find in our timeline in the 15th century. Common Era is when was the first Dalai Lama, and this institution was established. The current Dalai Lama is the 14th Dalai Lama, and all the Dalai Lamas are considered to be incarnations of Avalokiteshvara and of each other. So Avalokiteshvara incarnated to the first Dalai Lama, who incarnated as the second Dalai Lama, who incarnated as the third Dalai Lama, etc. So whenever a Dalai Lama passes away, he is expected, he will be incarnated in some other body, and then there is a certain procedure that is taking place after his death. So there are different omens and oracles that are considered in order to try and figure out who is the successor. So first there will be the process of identifying the area more or less where they should search, and then when they get closer and identify a few children, again by different marks of either the smoke of the death of the previous Dalai Lama, he can point the direction, or sometimes he can manifest in dreams and give different signs to the people that are supposed to find him. So all these directions lead them to certain children, and then they will examine the candidate children and will give them different objects of the previous Dalai Lama, or ask them different questions, and by this try to identify again who is the successor, and then appoints basically the new Dalai Lama. So the Dalai Lama is considered a bodhisattva, someone who incarnates also in this world, although he is already liberated, in order to help others and to help us to liberate. It is called tulku, and the meaning of the word Dalai Lama is a great teacher. So Dalai is ocean or great in Mongolian, and Lama is teacher or guru in Tibetan. And this is the meaning of this word. He is of course the head monk in Tibet, and before now we get a little bit into politics, but before that Chinese took control of the government, so he was also he was in charge also of governing Tibet basically, before the Chinese came into the picture. So with this we get to the end again of our Buddhism course. The further development is already in the West, when we find in our timeline, and in the West basically we can find all of the schools that we mentioned practiced. And we will end this class and this course with Prabhuji's words about Buddhism. Buddhism denies solidity and substantiality, but not the existence of the universe and the self. By pouring water from a bottle, you fill it with emptiness. Emptiness is not synonymous with non-existence or absence. Rather, it implies fullness. If we empty ourselves of hatred, we will be filled with peace. If we empty ourselves of words, we will be filled with silence. True peace manifests itself with the discovery that the I does not exist. Once the egoic phenomenon is transcendent, there is nothing left to defend or promote, and absolute emptiness is experienced. Every effort to achieve is futile. Having overcome the contradiction between everything and nothing, we will awaken to our original nature. By emptying ourselves, we will overflow with plenitude. And we will end this class and this course with Prabhuji's words about Buddhism. Buddhism denies solidity and substantiality, but not the existence of the universe and the self. By pouring water from a bottle, you fill it with emptiness. Emptiness is not synonymous with non-existence or absence. Rather, it implies fullness. If we empty ourselves of hatred, we will be filled with peace. If we empty ourselves of words, we will be filled with silence. True peace manifests itself with the discovery that the I does not exist. Once the egoic phenomenon is transcendent, there is nothing left to defend or promote, and absolute emptiness is experienced. Every effort to achieve is futile. Having overcome the contradiction between everything and nothing, we will awaken to our original nature. By emptying ourselves, we will overflow with plenitude. Thank you very much. Jai Prabhuji.